Welcome, Louise.
May we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance,
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning. It's Wednesday, November 1st, 2017. It's 10 a.m. This is the regularly scheduled general meeting for the Curry County Board of Commissioners. Does anyone else, we have several speaker slips on various topics. If anyone else wants to make public comments, please, at the back of the door, in the back room there are speaker slips. So please fill out a speaker slip. And you can bring it up to the clerk up here, John Jesuit. If somebody has, I'm just separating these speaker slips because if it's a speaker slip on an agenda item for this morning, we'll have to wait until that item is discussed to have that speaker. Bear with me, please. Number 7. Okay, we're going to move to agenda item 2. This is adoption, any amendments, any agenda amendments, and today it will be Commissioner Gold first.
I have none.
Okay. Commissioner Boyce, and then we'll have Administrator Hitt. Commissioner Boyce.
Mr. Chair, under consent calendar items A and D, I'd like to pull those out just for one quick request on A and a quick clarification needed on item 3D, which of course is the approval order for a new code enforcement officer.
Okay, are you okay with moving those out?
That's fine.
Discussion?
Yeah, that's fine.
And one more.
Okay, let me get those. Oh, okay. We'll put those after the regular public comments that aren't on the agenda.
Okay.
So we'll put that between 4 and 5. So we're going to move 3A, was that correct? And 3D?
And 3D, yes.
D. Okay, and another?
We have Roadmaster Robbins in the audience, and he's not on the agenda board, but I would like to have him come up in the beginning, and he has a presentation to make representing an employee of his that has very special medical needs, and I think you'll probably want to hear his quick presentation. So I'll request that and put it before the board here.
Are you okay with that, Commissioner Gold? Now, was that discussed, Commissioner Hitt? I had asked the Roadmaster first to touch base with you on that, if that was something that you could do.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. He did, because it was significant, what his request or item of interest in is a significant deviation from existing personnel rules.
Okay.
I felt it was
Okay,
not something I
okay.
could encompass.
Then is that okay with you, Commissioner
That's
Gold?
fine, and I think we should put it as quickly as possible
Thank you.
so he can get back to his
Okay.
Yep.
work.
So we could, on that one comment, we could add, let's just do it right after adoption of the agenda, before consent
That'll
calendar.
be good.
So we're going to add
You want one more set of hands?
Oh. Was it how many attorneys does it take to turn on a recorder?
I wasn't going to say
No,
that.
Just a joke, John.
okay. So we're okay with that. Do you have any others, Commissioner Boyce?
No, thank you.
Administrator Hitt?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. One of the things that I think needs to be a guiding principle for all of our meetings is that we limit our agenda to actual necessary items of business, particularly in light of the ordinance you all passed in the creation of the county administrator role. The county administrator needs to move forward both while I'm here and then the permanent, of course, continue with taking care of a lot of these routine administrative matters without having to come and put it on your agenda. So there's actually a long list of those, and over the course of the next several months, those will all be coming to you for formal approval and or action. But in the meantime, I think that we have at least a couple items here that I don't think are really items, at least in my view, and I realize some may disagree, but in my view, necessary items of business, or at least certainly in light of our very crowded agenda today, I think as a minimum could be postponed, and that's agenda item number 8, and then agenda item number 9A. 9A in particular, that could be something, I know Commissioner Boyce has some concerns there. I've talked to one member of the public that had a concern. That's something certainly administratively could be handled. Again, unless you as a board want to weigh in, and obviously you have the right to do that. I would say similarly with agenda item number 8, it's not really a policy decision you're being asked to make here. It's not a new ordinance or a resolution or order. It is just simply more of a discussion item. Sometimes those are in order for your business, but I think normally, unless it's something that is rather urgent or compelling, then I think those general discussion items are best left for commissioner comments. So that would be my recommendation, to either postpone or remove those 2 items, or allow them to be covered under commissioner comments.
So you're recommending that today, that these 2 be tabled or put under commissioner comments at the end of the day?
That's correct, sir. Yes.
And is it safe to say, Mr. Chair, that we have a lot of people wanting to speak on at least one of these issues, likely item 8. And they're here today to discuss that.
I don't see speaker slips, but that's here nor there. Okay, on that. So Commissioner Gold, are you
Well, I'm looking at,
with that?
yes, I'm fine.
With the which recommendation?
Yes, Administrator Hitt's recommendation. yes.
Which one?
Both items.
You want to postpone them both, may I ask?
Yes.
Okay. I will agree with that.
So if I may, Mr. Chair and Administrator Hitt and Commissioner Gold, there is real or perceived dysfunction of this board, and the issues of breaking the rules that were controversy, at the very least, back in April, of how to conduct this board. And I've been silent so many times, and so I bring it before the board. Certainly I made the deadline, and I offered it to the board for discussion today. And we have one member in the office, in the audience, that has faithfully attended meeting after meeting after meeting for the last 3 years, and he sees a breakdown. And I'm going to ask the board to reconsider that he and others that may not even be in opposition to what we're wanting to discuss here have the opportunity to speak today. And I think with the doors shut over there at the commissioner's office and the public locked out, it's even a greater representation and a concern for me that the public's a nuisance. Keep them locked out of the commissioner's office, and I mean, when are we going to be able to discuss this? Another week or two? I don't want those doors locked over there.
Okay, Commissioner Boyce, I think the motion basically.
We haven't had a motion.
Do we? I think we did have. Do we have a motion? If we needed a motion.
Well, I move that these two items be put under Commissioner comments.
Is that today?
Commissioner comments today? Yes, certainly.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have a second? Then that motion dies for lack of a second. Do we have a motion to table the items for now, as I think was one of the recommendations from Administrator Hitt?
I would move that we table the items with the agreement that I think, quite frankly, 50 minutes total on both items is way out of line.
Okay, so we have a motion to table
For now.
For now. Okay. Do we have a second? I second the motion. Any further discussion? Call for the question.
Excuse me, sir, but I'm attempting to bring formal complaint
You are
against
out
you
of
for
order.
violation
You
of
are
the
out of
rules of
order.
decorum, and now
Mr.
you're telling
Barnes,
me
you
that
are
this
out of
matter will
order.
not be heard.
You are out of order.
I
Please
understand
sit
that I
down.
am, sir, and I believe that you are also.
Please sit down.
When will my matter be heard?
Please.
I wish to file a formal complaint against you. I seek a change in the composure of this board by my
You
complaint.
are out of order.
It's not a trivial matter for
Continue.
discussion.
We will recess because you are disrupting this meeting. Please sit down.
As you have done many
Please-
times
please
before,
sit down,
sir, many
please
times.
sit down, Mr. Barnes. One more interruption, we'll
Oh,
take a recess.
stop.
One more.
Stop.
You're not recognized.
Needs to be 2 commissioners, sir.
We are going to take a 5-minute recess for continued disruption of these public meetings.
There's a 5th time I've been here. Yes, you are.
Build it, launch it. If you're only your best when you can play more than you work, if inspiration comes from the outside, you belong in Curry County, the westernmost point of the land you love and the edge between familiar and uncharted. Break the pattern. Be where the airports are as close as the beaches, and industry and recreation never cease to amaze. Dock, dive, and dine in a single day, and never lose your connection. This is the threshold of the West. Live where you can do you and do it well, at the farthest point from ordinary. Curry County, living on the edge.
It's 10:19. We're going to resume the meeting. We had the motion and a second to table items 8 and 9A. Call for the question.
Aye.
No.
Aye. Okay. Administrator Hitt, did you have any other comments?
I don't, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, I had one, and it's one brief question on, without removing a consent calendar item D, on the code enforcement officer job description is Community Development Director
She is.
Johnson? Yeah.
She is.
Yes.
No, I don't think that one was.
Yes, it was.
Yes,
Oh,
it
I'm
was.
sorry,
It
it was.
was.
I'm sorry,
It
I'm
was.
sorry, it was. My apologies.
And I think we moved it between item 4 and 5,
Correct.
is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve? Oh, I'm sorry, Council Huddle?
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
Thank you. Recently, there was some presentation and a claim made about public records being disclosed and perhaps a violation of that. I've conducted some legal analysis that I'd like to present to the board in executive session. The public records law allows us to, public meetings law allows us to convene to executive session at a duly noticed meeting, which this is. I've prepared some materials. I'd ask to have that go at the end of the meeting if possible, and it'd be time permitting.
Okay. Commissioners, Commissioner Gold, you're okay with that?
I'm fine with that, yes.
Certainly,
Voice?
yes.
Okay, so we'll add item, we're going to move 13, we're going to make 13, 14, we're going to make 13 executive session. And when we get to that, County Council, you can provide us with the appropriate statute for the
Certainly,
for the
Mr. Chair.
session. Any other additions, County Council?
Not from me, Mr. Chair. I do have additional material that I'll be submitting at the time the items on the agenda come up.
Okay.
So that's about the travel policy, some exhibits, and then I had some correspondence on the potential ballot question, I think, about
Okay.
the lending. So just some, but those don't require a change to the agenda.
Okay, so we then, do we have a motion to now approve the agenda as amended, including County Council Huddle's addition?
I so move.
Second.
Call for the question?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the amended consent calendar?
I so move.
Second.
Any further conversations on that? Call for the question?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I think we were going to then, let's ask the roadmaster to come up.
Doug Robbins with the road department, and I'd like to thank you guys kindly for letting me jump in the middle here. I know that there's lots of stuff going on today, and I apologize to anybody that I hold up here. Very quickly, we have a gal in our department, Kim Alexander. 3.5 years ago, she came down with cancer. She had breast cancer and went through a very tough time in her life. And at that time, she ran out of sick pay. And the previous roadmaster was here, and he was leaving the county, and he was able to donate time, sick leave, to Kim to get her through the battle that she was up against. And so what I'm coming to today is that after 3.5 years, Kim's illness has come back, and at this time she is off work. She has no sick leave left, and Lynn Carey, employee of 32 years, retired yesterday. He's got 444 hours, I believe, of sick pay, and he would like to try to donate as much of that as he can to Kim, and this took a action from the board last time that we did this, went through this process. So I'm coming here today to ask the board to consider donating as much time of Lynn's that is possible. I'd like to add that when this Kim went through this before, she worked every single day that she could, whether she was sick or any day she could get out of bed, she was here and did not take advantage of 1 minute of that time that was given to her. She's one of the best employees I've seen in the department, and she's got a real battle ahead of her, so I would appreciate any consideration of
How long did she work here?
She's been here probably 6 years or more. At this point, she was here well before I was, so she's been here a long time, and she's a very dedicated employee, one of the best. So,
We just have a suggestion to Administrator Kett, that we could, not knowing if there's any sort of limit on the policy that exists, but we could propose or a motion to provide as much as the policy would permit of that time, and then leave it open, not knowing exactly what it was, if that would be
I can tell you the policy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Typically, in the personnel rules, it says that you can donate up to 40 hours. Any person that has 240 hours banked, anything over that, they can donate up to 40 hours a year to a person. A person can only get 40 hours in a year also. So I'm asking for way beyond the 40 hours that would, is in the personal rules. And that's what we did before when this came up. We were able to go well over, actually 200 hours over that 240, or over that 40 that is in the personal.
So the beginning threshold is, did you say 200 or 240? What did you say?
240, an employee has to have that much bank before that person can donate to anybody else.
Okay.
And they can only donate 40 hours of their time
Over
to
the
a person.
over the 240?
Yeah,
Is that
over
correct?
the 240.
So the threshold
Correct.
would be, to start would be 240. So
So-
we could motion anything over 240 hours.
That was my feeling.
County Council?
I'm sorry, if I'm tracking this, you have to have 240 before you can donate, but if I heard the second part of that, the maximum donation, even once you have 240, you're limited to giving just 40, and a person who's receiving it, no matter how many employees donate, is limited to receiving a total of 40?
Correct.
Okay, and so
But
what
he
I
was saying is
understand.
that the board several years
Previously,
ago.
Yeah.
right,
Made
so
an
what
exception.
so I don't
Made
think
an
240 is the focus. It sounds like 40 is the focus. You would like the person with more than 240 to be able to donate more than 40, and the person who's receiving it to receive more than 40. Is that what we're really looking for here, I think?
Yes.
Do you understand?
But we can't and this is a question, we can't say that that individual could donate anything lower than the 240 that they have. In other words, that has to remain in the bank, if you will. Is that my
Yeah.
understanding?
Other
Yes,
than the
that's correct.
person is retired and it's going away, so it's there for the taking.
Right.
So-
Commissioner, Chair Hitt.
Administrator Hitt.
Well, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. So since he's retiring, that is all payable to him through PERS retirement. Is he aware of that, and is he willing to give up
Yes.
that
It's
PERS
on the
benefit?
paper right here.
So he is aware
Yes.
of that loss to
Completely
him?
aware. He
Okay.
Yeah, he gave that up yesterday, signed and
Okay.
dated from him, and this is something that comes from payroll that it's part of the procedure to pass time
Okay.
on.
So-
County Council?
This is just a suggestion at this point, but I think the board could make a motion to direct staff to bring back an order that would allow a donation, and it may be to the maximum extent permissible by law, for leave donation program, both giving and receiving. And then it would be up to staff to bring something back to you in this circumstance or others. And I will say I was, can't go there. Anyway, I'm not aware of a lot of limits on this legally, but I'll look into
Okay.
it.
Okay. I think that would be reasonable, and then have come back with something has some authority behind it, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
And bring something back. Staff could have something back certainly by the next
Certainly, we
annual
could.
meeting.
It's entirely possible, if we put our heads together, we may be able to work on this during the lunch recess or something, and come back with a quick order.
Possibly even sooner then.
Let's get it done today.
As quick as we can. It sounds like there's some urgency, is
Yeah.
that correct? Yeah.
There is.
Okay.
Okay. Is the board okay? Administrator Hipp, do you?
And I'm totally fine with that, Mr. Chairman, but let me just give a little bit of background. There are reasons why at least every organization I've been associated with has limits on those sick leave contributions, and the reasons are twofold. One is so that the person wanting to make the donation doesn't basically give up or sacrifice perhaps more than they really should. I mean, whatever that exactly might mean, but also on the giving side or the receiving side for the person receiving it, you know, the total number of available donatable sick leave hours is limited, both in the sense of how many people have more than 240 and how many people are willing. So I've been in situations where one individual got an exceptionally large amount, and then somebody else came along 6 months or a year later, had a similar need, but those extra hours were no longer available. Now, I'm not saying that's the case here. I don't know, don't have enough background, but just general background as to why those kind of limitations are normally set up.
Well, that might give us a little time too to see what occurred back in 2015 also.
But I think staff can work on this in the recess. If we don't have an order for you this afternoon, we could at least have a further clarification and further direction for the board.
Okay.
So I move that we postpone the decision on this until we get the legal background necessary to do so.
Discussion.
Hopefully this afternoon.
With that clarification, I'll second the motion.
Okay.
That's something I would show back up here later, or just
I
something you
don't know
guys are
that you
gonna
would
discuss.
necessarily need to.
Okay.
I
Would
think
be-
county administrator and myself and
Yeah.
personnel officer will
Okay.
work with you on but the piece of paper you have probably going to be very helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you could get that to the personnel officer, I think in the break, county administrator and myself will work with her, and then we'll be in touch with you. But I don't think you need to stay on campus.
Great.
I think we have unanimous agreement to
Yeah.
ask that
Yes.
staff.
I don't think we
do
voted on the
so.
motion.
Do we need to vote on a motion?
Probably should, since
Yeah.
this would technically be an
Yeah.
Okay.
amendment to
Okay.
your
Okay.
agenda.
So do we have a motion?
Mhm.
We had a second. Call for the question.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks,
Okay.
everybody, for your time.
Thank you, Doug.
didn't even discuss you leaving, Mr. Robbins.
So we had,
He needs to leave.
Dang.
we did the consent calendar with the 2 items.
I don't think we made a
Did-
motion
did
to
we-
approve it. No.
No, you did approve the
I thought we
remaining
did
items
the-
on the
yeah.
consent.
The
We did.
remaining, but
Yep.
not the 2 that were pulled.
The 2 that were pulled, you did not.
Okay, but we were going to have public comments next. We
Next.
put those 2 after public comments.
But we
So-
still need to approve the consent calendar with the 2 remaining items, don't
Oh,
we?
I thought that was.
No,
the-
we were going to pull those separately.
John
to-
Jesuit,
to
could
approve
you,
them.
so
To
there.
discuss further.
Sorry, excuse me a
Correct.
minute.
I
we-
don't think we made a motion for that.
Okay, so
You did.
there were items pulled from the consent.
discussion.
There were items remaining. My understanding is the chair entertained a motion to approve the items remaining. They were approved, and now we're into the items that were not approved. But I'm checking with John Jesuit if he has any.
3A and 3D
Were any on the consent agenda approved?
Yes.
The 2,
B and C.
those remaining.
Yeah, I
the-
missed
the
They
2
they were approved. There was a
Correct.
motion to approve the items remaining on the consent. Okay, and was it
Okay.
voted on?
So but we moved.
Okay, so there you
We
go.
moved 3A and 3D to follow public comments.
Okay.
So we'll take public comments now after, that aren't on subject on the agenda. Then following that, we'll address 3A and 3D. We have 4 slips from speakers on items that I do not believe are on the agenda. The first one is Gina Fay. Is it early? You want to come up and identify yourself, please? And this was to prohibit the establishment of sexually oriented businesses in Curry County. If you would just please identify yourself, and then you have the
I
floor.
am Gina Fay Early. I reside in Harbor, Oregon. I am working towards the possibility of establishing an ordinance that would prevent the establishment of a sexually orientated business in Curry County. If this ordinance does not pass, it will have adverse effects on our community. It is a matter of importance, and it is crucial that we work together as a community as diligently as possible. This issue of concern will increase crime, including but not limited to illegal drugs, pimping and pandering, prostitution, sex trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence, and sexual harassment. The industry also provides no employee rights to these women who are considered independent contractors, as they work for tips only while being forced to pay kickbacks to the paid employees. The women have a lack of basic human rights. They're asked to perform their job in a manner that risks their health and safety. Many women live in fear and do not want to stand up for themselves because they will lose their jobs if not cooperating. Having experienced sex trafficking as a minor along the I-5 corridor, and also working in the industry as a dancer and/or employee in locations all over Oregon, I understand the industry and I understand the crime it will bring to our small coastal town. This is an issue of magnitude, and it's vital that we support the decision to prohibit a sexually orientated business in Curry County, Oregon. It's a huge problem in our state of Oregon, and I consider my hometown of Harbor to be a haven where this type of industry will never be tolerated. Basically, an outside party has decided that this entity has decided that they would like to establish a strip club in Harbor, in our old Harbor Performing Arts building across from the Grange. And I would like to maybe see this ordinance and have the community vote and decide whether they want this type of business or not.
Did you have any other comment?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Boyce?
Yes, are you okay with questions?
Of course.
Well, I'm absolutely in awe of your courage
Thanks.
And my first question would be, do you have support? And I know that there are many like-minded folks in the Southern Curry area, all of our county, that would absolutely support what you just suggested there. I think it's a little vague on where this is going, and I just really appreciate that you're taking the lead, and personally and professionally, I'm most willing to help you, and I encourage you, and just want to extend gratitude.
Okay, thank you.
So one question would be, do you have support and even security in that sense? Take
Well,
whatever time you need.
the support that I receive is basically through community members, mainly religious organizations that would support this ordinance. Also, I've Officer Mello of the City of Brookings Law Enforcement Protection is interested in knowing my insight of the industry and what they can do. So they are very supportive as well. And yeah, I would start there.
What was the officer's name you mentioned again?
Officer Mello.
Okay. If it's
So I
okay with
plan
you,
to
I'll be
meet with
happy to get
Officer
in touch
Mello
with you.
here this week sometime in hopes that we can kind of collaborate ideas and whatnot. Oasis, I've met with them. They're working on bringing this issue up with their board, how it's going to affect their needs to help these women as well if this does become something that happens here in Curry County. I've been invited to go to Salem to meet with the senators to discuss this as well, but I'd like to work at a more of a local level first before bringing it up at a state level. So.
Do you have any questions or comments?
Has this business applied for a permit yet, or where is it as far as?
I'm not sure how far they are into the process. I know that the owner of the Lower Harbor Shopping Center, there, the South Coast Shopping Center on the lower end, has no disagreement in having this type of business there. So it would come down to the ordinance.
And there's a lot of vacancies there, right?
Right,
Okay.
but see how far this person is into the process would be another way to look at it is if they establish their licenses and what they need to do and open their business before this ordinance becomes in effect, all it would do is steal other people's freedom to compete with him in the industry. So it would give him more advantage. You know what I'm saying? Being the only club in Curry County. So it might have to go into like zoning laws to keep this away from schools, churches, community centers, parks, things like that. And hopefully grocery stores, because we have a limited amount of grocery stores. Nobody wants to take their children to a grocery store that is next to a strip club.
I would at this point, rather than, continue further here, maybe suggest, certainly Commissioner Boyce has reached out to you. I think, the zoning issue comes up or has come up, that you consider possibly contacting the community development director.
Yes.
And, we do some additional research, legwork, back and forth with you, outside of this meeting, and then possibly come back with something a little bit more knowledgeable, at a future meeting. That's what I would suggest.
Okay.
If you're okay with that.
I will do that.
Okay.
And I would agree with that, so we have something more definitive to talk about.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for coming.
County Council?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the speaker coming. We spoke on the phone, and I recommended she come and approach the board. And that was, once Commissioner Gold gave a second, and Commissioner Boyce as well, there's always some question from staff level as what is the direction to staff? Do we have direction from the board to dedicate, our staff resources on this? It sounds like the board is of consensus that you do want staff to dedicate some resources on this issue and bring it back to you for some further discussion.
would say within reason, yes,
Okay, thank you.
to do that, and I think
All
that
right.
would
And I
be.
think in the interest of our citizens here, South Curry County and Curry County, we need to look at this.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to make sure there's clarification. It helps me because, again, the speaker approached me and asked me to work on this, and I said I would look for board direction. So I've got it, and that's fun. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Barbas, and it says, please get county code online. So I'm assuming you want to talk about the county code.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Jan Barbas, Curry County. Just came to my attention that the county code is not available on the website, and I understand there are plans to try to get it on the website, but I wanted to express some urgency on that matter because I think we're kind of behind the times not having it on the publicly available in that manner. I was able to get my questions answered by staff, and I'm good for the moment, but just express that that's a priority for me at least.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Finley, is it Cheshire or Cheshire? Cheshire. You want to come up?
Cheshire.
Cheshire.
Cheshire, he said.
Cheshire.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Finley Cheshire, bringing an update on the burned out building in Harbor. The shed, which was left standing, has been cited as deemed unsafe for human occupation, for human occupying. And it also says in there it's unlawful for anyone to live in or occupy this building. But people have been observed coming onto the property between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. in vehicles, leaving their headlights on bright, and then wearing headlamps and poking through the rubble of the burned out building and the shed. And in addition, the burned out building and the shed are an attractive nuisance in that young children have been seen coming onto the premises and poking through the ruins. So if there's anything can be done to keep people out of there, we'd certainly appreciate it, but we very much appreciate the building being cited as unsafe.
Commissioner Gold?
I just have one question. Would it be possible for you to maybe take some videos of what's going on so that, I know the sheriff can't be there 24/7, but if we had some video footage of what's going on?
A neighbor's camera has caught people coming in there at these wee hours of the night.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll check and see if they have video of it
Okay.
that they can provide.
Because I think that might be helpful in order to be able to enforce the
Sure.
law.
Commissioner Boyce?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend you go out in the middle of the night. These people, needless to say, a little unpredictable. So
Right.
I'm sure you're using caution there, and I agree with Commissioner Gold that if there is video available, we could provide with the sheriff's office, and maybe there's something additionally that can be done.
I'll sure look into that.
Very much appreciate your report.
In addition to the people coming onto the property, when the wind blows, it kicks up the ashes and the soot and comes right over our fence, and we're having to live with that coming on our property and having to breathe it if we're outside. So the sooner it can be cleaned up, the better. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the update. The last speaker slip here for items I don't believe that are on the agenda is from a Connie Hunter, and it's PEG usage. Is that, you want to come up and identify yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Connie Hunter from South Curry County, and I'm speaking today as a private citizen, not as a media representative. When a local group began the process of applying for an FCC license to found a local community-based radio station that's nonprofit, that happened at approximately the same time they were discovering some of the problems with the PEG channel and that it was in jeopardy. The Public Education and Government channel is going to be an important thing to increase our civic engagement. At the time, Carl King, who was part of that group, took the time to explain the technical and administrative hurdles in place that needed to be addressed. So it's good to see this coming to fruition because we support civic engagement. My husband Skip Hunter, and I have been interested in increasing civic engagement and empowerment because Skip, as a college instructor of sociology, racial and ethnic relations, cultural anthropology, and Native American studies, believes and understands the importance of civic engagements among our most disempowered groups, including Native Americans and other minorities, our veterans, and our women. Traditionally, all subgroups are disempowered. Here in Curry County, it's no different. Civic engagement is considered an economic driver in and of itself. The PEG channel will contribute as well. But other things that contribute to economic development and civic engagement is showing up. Showing up as a county commissioner during and after a natural disaster is most of all comforting. The statistics bear out that of all the various natural disasters, wildfires prove to be the most provoking to people to leave immediately and in subsequent weeks and months afterwards. That means more people leave after wildfires, leave communities than any other natural disaster. I do my homework. Commissioner Boyce's presence and leadership has kept citizens hopeful and has encouraged many citizens and businesses to stay and rebuild. There was an exit fear among many citizens. Also, when the governor showed up at the food bank to thank the volunteers a week ago Sunday, we understood the value of leadership and showing up again. Not only did the governor show up to thank our volunteers at the food bank, but also State Representative David Brock-Smith, Alex Campbell, Regional Solutions Team Coordinator, who's in charge of economic development for Southern Oregon, Gary Milliman, and many others, including Commissioner Lily Morgan from Josephine County. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for encouraging civic engagement, and let's learn our lesson about cutting people short in their representation of people.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Barnes, you had one on the travel policy, which is an agenda item. You had one on the presentation of the PAC. I assume that was on agenda item 8. Am I correct or no?
No, sir. No, you are not.
Okay, what is that on then?
That one is just, I want to make a request of I guess, Mr. Jesuit and Mr. Hitt, that on the agenda, the packets over time have gotten to be rather unwieldy. And as a member of the public, I don't need to read the whole thing. I would like to be able to read the parts that I'm interested in. I was wondering, you have on the agenda the amount of time that each item is going to take. I was also wondering if in parentheses after that, you might note the page of the packet that item begins on. so that we don't, because scrolling through it all, there can be sometimes 40, 50 pages on something you got to scroll through to find it. That would just make things easier for everybody and members of the public, I think. So, and that was my comment.
Okay, that, just a point of information, that ultimately is done, of course, after the fact. That's the last thing, and there may be amendments or whatever afterwards, but would you still be able to include that in the packet before it goes out with the approximate page numbers? Because
yeah, I would believe so. John, Jesuit, would you think we could provide that prior to the?
Yes, that would be quite easily done.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Yes,
I didn't want to put you out, so thank you.
We will do that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So add page numbers. Okay, we're going to move backwards a little bit here and pick up on what was item 3A or what were items 3A and 3D. So 3A, and was that, Commissioner Boyce, was that your item also? Okay, you had the...
On the Title III funds that we have obligated to Coos Forest Protective Association, Harbor Fire District, and of course the Curry County Sheriff's Office, we have our 10-year fire plan here, wildfire protection plan, that is 2008. It needs some minor, some would argue maybe it's not minor, amendments and updating. And something we failed to do on this somewhat complicated system through the Title III process is leave enough of a fund, maybe as much as $10,000, to update this policy. I think if we approach Coos Forest Protective Association through the Firewise program, which, by the way, they have targeted us specifically to Cape Ferrello, which, in my view, and it's a widely held view, that is the #1 risk level that we have in this county. It's certainly not the only one. And in terms of the Firewise responsibility we have, especially after this year, there are other areas that we need to identify and work towards getting the citizens involved to a greater degree. So I think Coos Forest Protective, I refer them to Coos Curry Forest Protective Association, I think they're on board with that. And but we do need, either through the Sheriff's Office, there was a little bit left over, so either through the Sheriff's Office or Coos Forest Protective, we need to lobby a little bit to have some funds available to update our wildfire protection plan. Again, it's about 10 years old. And so, and I think they'll be open to that, but I think it's just something that I overlooked, or maybe we overlooked, and but it is something we need to refer back to as a community and as a county for the future. And I have this available. It's the only one I got, but if somebody wants to look through it, it is some terrific information. And again, it was done in 2008. That's all I have for now on this.
So are you proposing any changes or amendments to any of those?
I'd just like the board to maybe I'm asking for a consensus here that we can approach either the first or third applicant and ask for their help on this and a little bit of additional funding. And it may even go without saying, but I think that certainly Mike Robinson, Durant Boggs, certainly the sheriff know that this plan is outdated. We have a new emergency manager coming on board. And so I want to incorporate updating this plan within this Title III process. And by the way, there's been still more progress in the U.S. Senate towards making and allowing these Title III funds to be additionally flexible so that we could, as of a county, been an applicant correct me if I'm wrong, Council, we could have been an applicant in this significant amount of money that is available. So, like I said, I think we just kind of dropped the ball there and didn't think of it, but we do need funding for that, and we need to get on that right away, and it should be in conjunction with the FireWise principle and efforts.
Commissioner
I just have
Gold?
one question. Could that be part of the new emergency manager's
think that
duties to take care of updating that plan?
I think that goes without saying, and that should be perhaps number one.
Because I think, you know, a lot of the emergency preparedness planning needs to be updated for the entire county.
And that's the point I'm making here. And through that wildfire protection plan and Curry Forest Protectives already running in place, and they know that I'm going to be lobbying and pushing for this. And it's, as you've heard me say already, we're only 7 months away from the next fire season.
But what I'm saying is, wouldn't that be part of his job description to do that?
I agree, but it's a community effort. It's all of us to be involved, I think.
I'm not saying we shouldn't be involved, but I'm saying that's where it should start.
Well, I think it starts with us.
Well, maybe we could just, on that.
We're on the same page here.
I think, you know, and if there's no problem, and I'm sort of looking at both Administrator Hitt and County Council, you know, changing anything or approving now and going back to, you know, is this essentially a final approval as the next step? Is there any issue with doing that and then going back to change part of that request, either?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think if you look at the order, it has the specified requests from Coos Forest, I think Harbor, and then the Sheriff's Department, and then at the end it says the balance of the funds obligated to, I believe, Sheriff.
Right.
Correct.
And I think what we could do is we could add, you know, for purposes including but not limited to update of our fire
Maybe would
plan.
it be better to do
So
that at this point?
We
to
right. So
have a-
if that could be an amendment to the order, made in a motion, and I think all that really does is clarify to me what that last provision was of retaining the balance for the sheriff. And if we clarify what that means by saying, which means having our new emergency management coordinators and the sheriff work on the fire plan, I think that would be okay. And then we would submit this to the local RAC,
So why don't we
Resource
do that? And
Advisory Committee
any
anyway. And
changes
they'll
to a
have
job
that.
description
Sure.
can be done independent of,
Yeah.
of what's
Oh,
going
yeah,
on
that,
here.
yeah, that's no problem.
What did you just say, job description?
Oh, well, that's for the
For the
emergency
emergency
management.
manager.
Whether he
Any
needs
of
to
that
work on
comes
it. Yeah, that's
independent of this.
right.
So I'll make a motion that we amend this order to include, per your recommendation, Commissioner Gold, including the Sheriff's Department, or including, excuse me, rewind just a little bit, including the emergency management program for the county through the Sheriff's Department. And I can assure you that the Forest Protective Association will be working with the Sheriff's Department on this and the FireWise.
Is that clear enough then?
Right, and
Too long a motion, I
you
know.
mentioned, Commissioner Boyce, for the purposes of updating the fire plan.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay,
No.
so
Which is part of the FireWise project, yes.
Yeah.
that
should be.
We had a motion and
I'll second that.
a second. Call for
Okay.
the question?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so what we'll do is, again, in the recess, we'll get the order in shape for signature.
Now,
and
the
then
other
send it to
one
the
was
RAC.
item 3D, which was the order appointing a new code enforcement officer, specifically the job description. And I think Commissioner Boyce, you had the floor, you had pulled that one.
Thank you. If we can find this person, one comment I had, concern, be willing to wear a uniform if required. The concern I have is, does that, under the community development program, is that within their responsibility and does a uniform put it in more of a law enforcement capacity? I don't have the answer to that, but maybe you do, and that's a concern I have.
Mr. Hitt?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Code enforcement officers typically either fall under community development or the police or sheriff. I've seen both, and I've seen both work very well. The code enforcement officer usually is a uniformed position. There is a state certification for code enforcement officers. So if the person we hire doesn't already have that certification, we'd send them to that program very quickly. So I believe that he or she, whoever ends up filling that position, would be able to function equally well either under the sheriff, who has expressed a preference not to have that role under him, but I think, again, he or she will perform quite fine in the working under the community development branch.
Part of the job description was the capacity and ability to persuade in a gentle way to. I appreciated that portion of the job
Yes.
description, and that's.
It's a hard job. It is
It is
very
a very hard
job.
job,
Yep.
and there again, I think there's exposure back to the expansion of the marijuana industrial growing issues that we have throughout Oregon. You know, I'm going to be lobbying for a second code enforcement officer. I think probably likely sooner than later, and they need to be incredibly well trained. They need to be well compensated, and they need to be greatly supported. And to do that, we're going to have to raise resources. We're going to have to find the funds. And so I'm going to keep, even though I've been defeated on that within this board on numerous occasions, I'm going to be working to continue to promote that, because it's going to be a very important requirement. That's all I have on that.
Okay, so are we, because this had noted that there were some, I think, changes. There was an email that came out from, I believe, the community director on a slight change on the code enforcement
Right.
description.
Carolyn, was there, did you pass out, or did they get the correct updated version of the job description? Or were there
Well,
any
the job
further
description
changes?
is the same
Yeah.
as what you got in your packet. We're awaiting a little word on, from LGPI about the salary
Oh,
range.
salary range.
Okay, it was just the range then, and the
Yeah,
classification.
and I can talk to you about that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So are we okay then to have a motion
I move
to
that,
approve what was item 3D?
I move that we approve,
Could I speak to your motion? before you do
Sure.
that?
Before you make it.
Because I don't have the salary range correctly, I would recommend that your motion state that you approve the job description subject to the correct salary range being identified, and perhaps you delegate the authority to the county administrator to give the green light.
How urgent is that we do this and then catch up with the paperwork? Or if it's not urgent, how about we catch up, we correct it and then bring it back in a corrected version? Do you have a
I would
is there a
really like you
preference?
to authorize the description.
Okay.
Sans the salary. I think I gave you a pretty good idea last time of what it was.
Okay.
It's just that we want to make sure we're framing the salary within the context of the correct union.
Okay.
That was.
okay, so
Well
you
said.
just want a motion to approve the job description at this time?
Subject to the salary range being confirmed by LGPI with the green light by county administrator, once that happens.
Okay, I move that we approve the job description of the new code enforcement officer, subject to the salary schedule being approved by LGPI and the county administrator.
Yes. that
Second.
would be my
Good
recommendation.
motion.
Okay.
I was
Any
trying to get
further
it.
discussion? Call for the question?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna have to jump past 6 and go to 7, which is a public hearing.
Okay.
And it's a continuation of an earlier hearing on the Curry County Comprehensive Plan zoning ordinance amendments related to natural hazards and the proposed order. Community Director Johnson?
Carolyn Johnson, Community Development Director. I'd like to thank all these folks for coming today. They were here on August 2nd, and because you continue the public hearing, many of them are back, and I appreciate them participating in the process. The comments that you received at the last meeting were fairly lengthy and informative and very helpful. And since that August 2nd meeting, DLCD has advised that the language that was presented to you at that time was not something that was mandated by the state, which was, that was some news that is very important for us to find out, because technically what that means is the language that you saw is not something that is absolutely required. The county currently has regulations in place for folks that live in areas that are potentially impacted by natural hazards, landslides, liquefaction, coastal erosion, wildfire. And to identify where those places are, we have been using a map that is some 20 some years old for some time. And we believe that it is quite outdated. So when DLCD indicated that Dogami had the resources to put together a map for Curry County that identified these hazards, that was good news, and that was going to go hand in hand potentially with the text changes that you looked at last time. At this point in time, I'm recommending that you table, and not table, but deny the ordinance that was presented to you at your last meeting. For a few reasons. The changes that are proposed are not mandated. The current chapter that we have in the zoning code is adequate to address the needs that we have now. And the comp plan chapter 7 has adequate regulations at this time. But that all being said, that was just one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle was the map itself. And if I could walk you through how a person can find out whether or not they're subject to the requirements of our current regulations. When someone comes in with their application and their map of where they live, we look at the map that we have that's 20-some years old, and we say, well, it looks like your property is in an area where there's a potential hazard. So under our current regulations, you have to have a geologist come and give you an assessment, not a full report, but just an assessment identifying whether or not they believe, in their professional opinion, that additional mitigations or construction design features are required to build your home or whatever it is you're going to build. If they come back and they say, no, I don't think this is necessary, then the story's over. You go ahead, you get your permit, you move on. If they come back and they say, you know, it looks like you've got a fault line running right through the middle of this thing, then, you know, we say, you know, you need to get an expanded geology report. And once you get that, bring it back, and we'll make sure that whatever the geologist has recommended, we include in the requirements for you to build your home. So what we have in place now is kind of a two-step process. So we're feeling like that is, it's still workable and we can still work with that. But going back to the map, again, it's our belief that the map that we have is outdated, and that because it acts as kind of like the trigger for folks to be alerted, hey, your property's in an area where there's a hazard, we think it's important that people have access to the most recent material. Now, one way to do that is for the board to adopt a new map. Another way to do that is for us to retain the existing map, but that our staff informs folks, hey, this is our map. We don't think it's the most current. We recommend that you take a look at the Dogami map. And then they can do as they wish. They can decide to look at it or not look at it. It's up to them. So that would be one way that you could move forward with your house without having to go through a full-blown geology report if your initial assessment said it really wasn't necessary. But the map is still important. And I have invited Bill Burns from Dogami to come and talk to you today about how they arrived at the science of the map and how that was put together. And what I would like to do is have you listen to his presentation, and if you see fit, allow the public to ask a question or two of him, if that would work for you. There are a lot of folks that have questions. After that is done, then I would like to have the opportunity to come back to you and talk just a little more. I'll be very brief. But what I'm going to be recommending is that you not adopt the map, the Dogami map at this time, but that we bring it back at a future date for you to consider. Now, when I talk about bringing it back, I'm talking about bringing it back to the people first. We go out and we have some community meetings so folks can come in, see what it might mean for their property, and take some time that way so people can be informed in a much less formal setting. And then ultimately we would bring it back to the board for consideration. So those are my 3 recommendations. I'm kind of at a place in my presentation now to turn it over to Mr. Burns, and I'd like to reserve the opportunity to come back and speak in a little while. Before I do sit down though, if we could, there's folks downstairs listening, and if I just want to make sure they understand that they can come up and speak when it's time. And we've got, I don't know, there's probably another 20 people downstairs. So anyway, thank you. And this is Mr. Bill Burns.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Bill Burns. I'm an engineering geologist with the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, and I work on natural hazards, understanding natural hazards and providing that information. Put together a small little PowerPoint. A lot of what I'm going to show you is extremely visual, so it's important to be able to see it. So can I run that, or should I just go over near the laptop? Would that work, or what?
Do we have a mouse for you?
Yeah, whatever works.
We have an unruly mouse here we've been trying to figure out.
Yeah, we need new
luck.
ones.
Okay.
Good luck.
Oh,
Here it comes, yep.
Okay.
Is that you on the edge of the cliff there? Looks like you have a life jacket on.
Yeah, that's me. Let's see if we can get it to go. This mouse is a little tough, isn't it? Okay, there we go.
Excuse me, before you start.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to move this back a little bit? 'Cause
Oh,
I think
sure,
folks
I
in
can.
the back
Or I
can't
can just
see.
stand
Sure.
back here. How's that work?
Is that-
Well, you get closer, if you move it back, you're closer to the mics, otherwise they won't be picking
okay.
you up.
So I can just roll this? That work?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Great. How's that? Better? Great. Again, so I'm from the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. We're a state agency, very similar to the USGS is for our nation. We are for Oregon. And our main goal is really to provide communities in Oregon with information about the science, the hazard itself. And in this case, we're talking about geologic hazards. And yet this is me standing out at a site where we had a landslide, so the ground in front of me had moved away. We're out there collecting data. And so why is it important to understand the hazard? I'm sure everyone's very familiar with this landslide and sinkhole that we had in the harbor area. This big portion slid down and went away, and we had this sinkhole as well.
Excuse me, if we may, I see somebody came in there.
Downstairs,
You can also,
see this, so.
Uh-oh.
Taken? Okay, then I'll just squat down in the hallway.
Hadn't we
I thought he said
arranged
that it
a
was,
way
yeah.
to?
Downstairs.
Yeah, I think it's just audio.
Pardon me?
I think it's just audio downstairs.
Oh,
we-
because the whole,
yeah,
they had to
yep,
send that unit
Yep.
back.
Okay.
That's why.
That's why.
So they don't have the video.
Just,
Yeah.
Commissioner Boyce?
if I may,
Yeah.
apologize for interrupting. Mr. Burns, is that your last name?
Yes.
Yeah, the only thing about the sinkhole, that might suggest to the public that that was a natural slide, and there were several variables and factors, as I understand, going through that time, that there were plugged culverts and other issues, that that was not a normal slide, that, maybe you can clarify that if necessary. That's all, thank you.
Sure, I can. I mean, hazards like landslides sometimes are natural and sometimes are caused by us. And so when we do studies like this, we actually consider both. And so whether it was caused or exasperated by something that man did, we include them all because they can all affect all of us. The other thing about everything I'm showing here today has been already published and is available on our website along with this PowerPoint. So if you miss something, don't worry, it's all very accessible, and I can show you how to get to it. In the county, we have at least 50 landslides recorded during the last 20 years. We've heard about this potential for strong future development here. We obviously have this very important transportation route, right? Highway 101. So, and we've had landslides. So it's when the hazard kind of overlaps with all the stuff that we're concerned about, the roads and our houses and businesses, and that's risk, and that's what we're really concerned about, is when we have risk. How likely is it that we're going to continue to have landslides here? Well, as you can see from our annual precipitation map, and you guys know how it rains down here, it's going to continue to rain. Precipitation is one of the triggers for landslides. Also, the earthquake hazard maps, we know that we're going to have a big earthquake someday, and it's going to shake a lot, and that is going to cause a lot of landslides as well. We also have steep slopes and, unfortunately, kind of weak soil and rock and geology. And you kind of combine all those things, and we're going to continue to have landslides down here. So the goal is really to reduce the risk part, right? That interaction between all the stuff we're worried about and where these landslides can happen. So several years ago, we did a project along the coastal strip of Curry County. That project we did with the county and the Department of Transportation, and FEMA provided some of the money, and we mapped the landslides using this very new technique. I'll show you in just a minute. In this area that's outlined along here. And the maps were published in 2014, so several years ago. They've been available as Dogami Open File Report 014-10. And all this information, again, like I said, is available on our websites for anyone to access. And if you get in there and you see stuff, you have questions, that's what we're here for, to answer questions about the science that went into this and what it means. So this is some new LiDAR data. LiDAR is a very new technology that we just started to use probably 10 years ago or less. And what happens is an airplane gets this very fancy sensor on the bottom of it, and it flies back and forth and shoots these lasers out and takes these readings and gathers it back, and we get this very detailed image of what the actual ground surface looks like. And as you guys know, actually seeing the ground and what it looks like is kind of hard, especially in Western Oregon, where we have all this really dense vegetation. And so, you know, our old techniques used to use aerial photography. We'd take a picture of the ground, and basically all you'd see was a bunch of trees. But with this new technology, we can actually see the ground, and that's really important. This little block diagram over here is kind of an idealized diagram of what a landslide looks like when it happens, right? So you can see the ground used to be kind of flat, and after we have a landslide, we get this steepen and escarpment at the top and along the side. Get these internal blocks that have kind of dropped down, right? You can see it actually deforms the ground surface. You get this toe that kind of bulges out and maybe cracks in the ground and all that. And it's that morphology, or that shape of the surface, that we look for in the LiDAR. This is LiDAR over here, LiDAR topography. It's got contours and colors. This is kind of a high point right here. And here's another high point. So this is a mound coming up. Those yellow things over there are buildings. This is actually right inside in the southeast corner of the city of Eugene. Project we're working on right now with the city of Eugene and Springfield. This is Interstate 5 coming along here. And what we're doing is mapping where these landslides, like this, have occurred in the past. Where are the existing landslides? And what you can see here is, you see this shape here, this round hill that was here, and all the slopes along here look kind of linear, right? They're all going down in a nice fashion, except it kind of looks like this part here used to come around here and now is gone, right? Can you see that? Where that part of the mountain is, looks like it kind of collapsed and went away. And there's actually another one of those over here. Again, looks like that part of the hillside, or that part of the hill has collapsed. And then what happened is actually that material flowed down the slope in a fashion like this. You can kind of see that, right? You can see the edges of the material here and this toe down here. There's the edge of the material there. So the material that was here, flowed down the slope. Same thing over here. That's exactly what we've mapped. That's what we did. We took this very high resolution topography and we mapped, okay, we can see where this has happened in the past. So what we end up doing is actually drawing polygons or shapes around those areas and identifying, okay, here's where those areas are. It also inadvertently actually identifies where that has not happened at the same time, right? Very accurately it tells us where it has happened, but at the same time it also says, hey, there's never been a landslide here. So this is what we did. It's called a landslide inventory. An inventory of all the landslides that have occurred in the past. It's not a model. It's not some calculation or something like that. It's actually mapping where they've occurred. Yes.
So if I might, because they have the contour lines there, could you give us an idea of what the dimensions, what those contour lines are as far as feet between each line?
Sure. These are 3-foot contour lines. So the elevation difference is about like this. The resolution on the LiDAR data in there is 3 foot also, which is about like this. So every 3 foot by 3 foot, we have data about what's happening in that area. This is very, very dense data for a huge landscape like we're talking about. This is what we did along the strip in Curry County. Now let's jump over to your county, and we'll look at some examples in here. So this is just south of Port Orford. I'm sure you guys drive along here all the time. Yeah. I drove along here last night. As I was coming down here, my car went dunk down as I went onto the landslide, and then going back up as I came off of it. I'm sure you guys are very aware, right? Repaving all the time, new lines and such. This is an aerial photo of this area, and this is how we used to map landslides. And this is what I do. I'm an expert at doing this, and you really can't see much in this except there's a lot of trees. It's very hard to see what else is going on. Back in the 60s and the 70s, our department started getting new data, topographic data. This is the USGS topographic data. The coast is along, the beach is down here. Highway 101 is kind of coming up through there. And this is the type of data that we used to map where landslides had occurred in the past. And you can see this funny looking red polygon down here. Someone used this data a long time ago, decades ago, and identified this area and said, hey, we're concerned about landslides in this area. The actual big landslide, try to use my laser, it doesn't work very well. The actual big landslide that's in here is actually up in here. And back then they couldn't recognize that. And now what we did was we went through, we used that new topographic data and remapped everything, and this is what the new topographic data looks like. And the new landside inventories that we mapped are these areas in black that are outlined in here. The one thing you'll probably notice is, well, hey, this big area of red, we didn't map again because it was incorrectly mapped, decades and decades ago. They just didn't have the technology to be able to see that. There is a couple smaller ones that occurred within this area, but definitely not this whole big extent. And the big one that I was talking about, this guy here, you can kind of see the headscarp running here, and all this land in here has a very different shape than the land over here. This is that giant landslide that you drive along here, your car goes down this scarp and then back up the other one. Within these big landslides, another thing that happens a lot is because this material has been sheared and come down the slope and kind of stirred up, the geologic material, we can have smaller landslides happen within these large landslide complexes, right? So we'll have small landslides occur within these ones, reactivations. And there's a couple that are down here on the beach, these three down here that we'll look at in just a second. Oh, sure.
Mr. Burns?
Yeah.
How much longer do you think you might be on this?
A couple more minutes.
Great, thank you.
That work? Okay. So this is what our final map ends up looking like. The PDF map, which again is online, and each one of these polygons, we have a bunch of information that we put with them, like how deep are they, what type of landslide, anything else that we know about them. This is me standing at that spot, looking down. This area right here is that large landslide that has moved to the coast. And there are those little smaller landslides that I showed you on that last map occurring along the toe of that bigger guy. So this is just a summary of what that project was like. The previous mapping had 125 landslides, 50 historic points. Our new maps have 3,061.
Wow.
There's a big change. Although at the same time, I urge you to remember that where those are and the exact extents of them are much, much better than that older past mapping. And they also identify pretty accurately not only where they've occurred, but where they haven't occurred yet, which the old mapping really doesn't do that well, either of those things. All this data, we have PDF maps like old-fashioned paper maps, but GIS data as well. It's free for everyone to get on and look at. This is what that set of maps looks like. There's 8 of these plates, and this is just an example of the one that sits in here, and I'll show you another one. And all these yellow and red areas are these landslide areas. This is another one. This is from Port Orford going south, and there's that one that we were just looking at, this area in here. There's Humbug Mountain and several of these quite famous landslides that you guys have down here on the south coast. And lastly, I just wanted to remind you about a couple of things that are really important about landslides versus a lot of these other hazards that we have. Some of these other hazards, really like earthquakes and floods, get a lot of help from the federal government in as far as funding goes, pre-disaster and post-disaster. And landslides really do not get that help. We had to beg and plead for money to do this study. These other hazards have insurance. You can get insurance for a flood and for earthquake. You cannot get insurance for landslides. And so, what happens in the majority of the events is that we see this like over and over throughout Oregon. And when a landslide happens, the piece of property gets completely destroyed. People lose their house or their business. It's deemed uninhabitable. Have you ever heard that yellow red tag thing that they do on a house, right? They say you can't get in it. You were talking about one that got burned. Same kind of thing. They say you can't go in your house. And the property is lost, and it's still your property, and you still have to pay your mortgage on it. I mean, it's devastating to people. So we've got to be a little bit more proactive with this hazard versus some of these other hazards where we can get insurance and people will come help us after, something bad happens. And you know, when this stuff happens, it's devastating, not just for the family, but the whole community. So this is one that we need to be a little bit more proactive up front, rather than try and wait for it to happen and then, you know, hope for help. And usually that's the part that doesn't happen, and that's just terrible. Any questions? That was all I had. Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific examples of Curry County in recent years where we actually had somebody's house, due to a natural slide, go down the mountainside?
I don't. The only one I heard about was in Harbor, that a slide came down and hit somebody's house from the back.
Okay, thank you.
So there's another issue that's going on. It's the coastal erosion part, and our department also makes coastal erosion hazard maps. And you know, the landslide hazard, there's some overlap with that coastal erosion piece, right? Sometimes it's erosion that's happening. Sometimes actually a landslide happens along that coastal strip as well. So I'm not talking about the coastal erosion part, but that is an interaction that can happen as well. Yeah.
If we could, before we take, could we get the handheld wireless mic and then we can pass it around?
Oh, this
or
one.
Oh, yeah, you have the lapel. Sure. If we could, you keep that and we just hand that to somebody in the audience so they don't have to get up and you just identify
Testing,
yourself
1, 2,
and
3.
ask your questions.
I had a question regarding the state in general.
Mm-hmm.
Have you mapped the whole state, and specifically, have you mapped Coos County, and what have the other counties done in regard to these maps?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, we have not mapped the whole state. We've mapped a very small portion of the state. It's very expensive work to do. And so we don't get funds, so I have to apply for grants to FEMA and beg them to give us money to do this type of work. And so no, we haven't done many places at all. Yeah, communities do a whole variety of things with these maps. In fact, a project that I'm working on right now with the Department of Land Conservation and Development is to review what the range is that communities have done with this data. Some communities don't do anything, they just use it as piece of information. Some communities, you know, swing all the way over, like the city of Salem, and they have a very detailed set of codes and rules that go along with these maps that look at what are you doing, how are you doing it, and what the hazard is, and that all dictates what they need to do at that particular site. Yeah.
Mr. Burns, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Yeah, Ed Thomas is my name. As you've there's no question, but the map we're here involved with rests on LiDAR, right? Okay. The map we're here involved with rests on LiDAR, right? LiDAR testing.
Well, that was one of the main pieces of information that we used to make it. Is
What
that
other
what you're saying?
information?
Oh, we did field work down here.
Okay, but the large area mapping, that's LiDAR based, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
LiDAR doesn't penetrate the surface of the earth, though, does it?
No.
Right.
No, actually, it doesn't even penetrate water.
Right.
Either. So yeah.
So it's not the same as drilling down to find out what the soil is like, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why we recommend in our maps that if you do want to know more about that particular landslide, that's exactly what you should do.
Right. So what it does is, as I understand it, as you've explained it, you get a picture of, over time, of changes in the landscape, minus vegetation and structures.
Well, it's only at one time. It's collected, and it's kind of a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
So it's not serial in that sense, but yeah.
Hey, has LiDAR been received into evidence in any court proceeding that you know about as expert support says, he concluded that high accuracy DEMs, which are the photos, the laser-based photos, at regular intervals might also be used as a good source for mapping new landslides through change detection. The long and the short of it is, the author doesn't, LiDAR isn't the be-all and the end-all, and that's a 2006 article, and he discusses it, but hardly in the same terms that you're using it here, that it is the be-all and the end-all and will do it. And I you know, that creates a problem. It would for the county, in the event of litigation, if the mapping thing results in damage to property values, litigation results, and you can't get into evidence LiDAR because it doesn't qualify as expert support, the county's going to be in some difficulty there. The other side's lawyers is going to be very happy about that. So.
I'll just comment one thing on that.
Sure.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to claim to be, and I won't comment on any of that. But I will tell you, I have never heard of hazard mapping causing property values to go down. Have you guys heard of that?
Wait, you don't think that
No, but
if you find your...
Sorry, not heard. Have you actually seen it happen? So, for example, with the wildfire that you just had, did all of your property values go down with that? Okay. Well, I'm just commenting on that. Like, our department also makes tsunami hazard zone maps. You guys are like really aware of those. I have not seen that cause. I haven't heard people say, "Hey, my property value went down because you guys made that map." And I also want to point out that our map doesn't. Those landslides were already there. They're not something that wasn't there before we mapped them. So just want to clarify on that stuff.
But it doesn't seem so difficult, does it, that if suddenly as a result of the map your property where you have your home is now a landslide hazard area, that'd be worth
less.
Less?
Yeah. It seems like a reasonable conclusion to jump to, except, like I said, I haven't ever heard of that actually happening. Now, I have heard of properties values dropping because there was an active landslide there ripping apart people's houses, but that I think we would all agree on.
Would you agree, though, that say, retaining a geologist, doing the drilling and so forth, would be more reliable than a large area LiDAR-based zoning?
Absolutely. That is exactly what we recommend with all of our products. In fact, but without this, it's hard to know where to do that, right? If you don't have a map that says, hey, this is the area that we're worried about, and this area we're less worried about, how do you know when to maybe go to that next step? So that's the intent of
well,
this.
our existing ordinances require you to do that, and we did that. You know, before I bought the property, would have it tested for real.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all that I have.
Okay, great.
Hi, Sandra Shibata. I have two questions. First of all, one of the comments that I heard from a number of people in the last public meeting had to do with the red marker lines and the inaccuracy of where those lines exist on your maps. My second question is, I might be moving ahead, but how do you map liquefaction?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't really involved in the liquefaction part, so I'm just talking about the landslides today. So that's the second question. What was the first one, though? I don't understand.
Red markers that come down the middle of your, this is an area and it's in here is a danger zone and we have a little red line around it.
So like this?
Well, yeah, sort of. How do you, what's the accuracy of those lines? How do
I'm
people
sorry,
know whether they're in or around
could you go ahead and speak into the microphone, please?
People were wondering how if their land was right in that area, where exactly was that black line on the map, and how could they determine whether or not they were in that area?
Sure. Well, I showed you how we made them, right? So that's not the question, right? The question is whether your piece of property, how this overlays. So what we do is provide this data in a GIS format so that the county can take that data, overlay it onto, for example, your lot extent, and you can look at that extent and determine whether or not you're in there or not. That's kind of the next step, I guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
my name's Carl Netkin. I'm a real estate broker.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt in my mind that your new science is far advanced from the old science, but I just want to get an understanding. You just mentioned layering, number one. Layering can be skewed, so there are discrepancies there. Additionally, this entire area in Reinhardt Creek, for example, and that whole landslide, yeah, that's obviously a massive earth flow. You can drive on the highway and see that, but there are plenty of safe places to develop within that property, within that 1,000 acres or whatever it happens to be there. Basically, I just want to make a statement. It sounds like it's pretty well covered, and that is that this is another tool of science. It's a work in progress. It's not perfect. I'm sure you can't tell me that without a shadow of a doubt that that's all a hazard area. There may be some good areas in it. And the same thing is that there might be areas that are unmapped that are actually active. And so it's only good as a general tool. The other thing about it is you said it's a snapshot in time. Do we know if that landslide happened 5 years ago or 5,000 years ago? And if it's 5,000 years ago and it was a top layer that slid over a nice solid rock base and we have it mapped as a hazard area, it could be structurally, for a house, one of the most stable places on the coast, for all you know. And so I just want the county to recognize that we don't want to stigmatize and maybe cost people property values by becoming overly concerned by this mapping. It's a tool, it's a good tool, it should be used for development standards. But don't put too much criteria based on it because it's not a perfect science, plain and simple. It's new science, you mentioned it. It's a snapshot, you mentioned it. And it's not perfect.
Yeah, in fact, as we do the mapping, you're right, we put a confidence of mapping with each landslide. And we do some scoring that tells you how confident we are. So you're right. Was there other questions you wanted me to answer or no?
No, just basically, I basically want to make a statement, and it's been covered, essentially, that this is not the end-all. It's not a Bible. It's a new guide with newer information.
Yeah.
And that I believe that the county, when looking at their development standards and their process, should utilize potential hazard mapping. Everybody should be aware of it and know about it. But be careful with adopting things that can cause undue stress and harm to people when in fact it may not be accurate.
Yeah, I would agree. There was one thing that you said that wasn't quite right, though, I would like to comment on, which is this idea about the date of these landslides. You're absolutely right. We don't have dates on when these things actually started. But it's, you know, for a landslide inventory like this, what's really important is just identifying where they are. And what we see over and over and over again is reactivation of these existing landslides or portions of them. And they almost never do this thing that you said, which is they slide down and then become stable. That almost never happens. And so, but there are areas in here where certain people could take on a certain amount of risk that they want to, and they could do a study within here and say, well, I'm okay living at that certain amount of risk. We all make that decision on many things in our lives all the time. And, you know, doing a study and having someone do a site-specific study drill here and say, yeah, you can build here, but hey, in 10 years your house might be all cattywampus and torn apart. And those people might want to take on that risk. All we're saying is, hey, have the information so that you can make an educated decision.
Right, and that's, I just want to reinforce that. I actually
if
know
that's
of a
it, then we are on the
right
same
in
page.
that area, and it's literally built on what the geologist that did the on-site work called was basically a sea stack that's inland. It's on a rock. And it's not moving. And it hasn't moved for, I don't know, it's been around for about 20 years. So.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page. You know, the other part of it is these big earthquakes that we're going to have. You know, and when we have them, some of the science that I've seen have said that some of these things are going to move tens of feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. This is what the models say. And, you know, when you look at them, that's about, they've moved way more than that in the past. So it's good to understand that, yeah, sometimes we think short term, next 10 years, next decade. but sometimes it can be longer, and we don't know when that's going to happen. But it's good to to have the understanding about it and make a decision,
Right.
you know,
It's
for
good to
yourself, an
acknowledge and
educated
use.
decision,
Yeah.
rather than say, I don't want to know, you know.
Yeah, nobody wants to not want to know. They want the
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
I just don't want the information to become gospel because it's not 100% accurate. It's a tool.
Right. Actually, if you read the report, that's exactly what we say on the maps and in the report. So,
Thank you.
that it's a piece of science. Yeah. Good. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Ector, and I was
Hi.
downstairs. We lost the feed, so this question might have gotten
Okay.
asked already, so my
Sure.
apologies if it has. But this is a pretty detailed manual process that you're going through, right? You have to go and through you're doing it manually, it looks like to me, where you've got an expert looking at this data.
Yeah.
And drawing by hand or on the computer,
Yeah.
polygons.
Yep. Then we
My
go out in
question,
the
though-
field and we collect field data. Then we go back and we redo it, and then we have people review it, and then we redo it until we get it as best we can.
So my question is, how much of Curry County has gone through this process that you have the data completed?
Oh, not much. I had a map up here that you probably missed. I can show you. Here it is. So see that little strip along the edge there? That's where we got, like I said, I had to apply for a grant to FEMA and beg them to give us money, and we got enough to do that little strip there.
Thanks.
Yeah. We did just recently get some money from the BLM to map areas where we have LiDAR inside of the Chetco Bar burn area. It's a very small portion that just sits down in here. We need that LiDAR data to be able to do it. So we are going to do additional mapping down in here with the BLM. Yeah, please.
David Barnes, I just want, what constitutes a landslide for your purposes? How much land has to move for you to put it on your map?
Right. Really, the difference between erosion and mass movement. And what that is erosion is really defined as individual particles moving, where mass movement is kind of a lump of particles all moving together. And that's what we're talking about. There is no minimal volume or maximum volume threshold involved with that.
So I live on Jerry's Flat Road. I live in the slide section of town, and there's regularly rocks fall off the side of the road. Sometimes it's one rock, sometimes it's a few dump trucks full of rocks.
Yeah.
Would that just be considered erosion?
Nope, we consider rockfall as part of mass movement. Those rocks are made up of a bunch of little particles, or sometimes there's a lot of them. Yep, so we map, rockfall is included in these. You'll see each one that's tagged with the different type of process that's happening. So rockfall has a little RF next to them. But some of them are these debris flows that, come down these gullies, and they're very water saturated, and they're almost like a flood. But they have so much material in them that they're actually acting like a landslide as well. So those are included as well. Yeah.
I'm sorry, do we have any more in the audience? Any more questions?
I'm Steve Shannon, live in Brookings, and we just rebuilt our house 7 years ago on the coast, right on the coast, and the existing laws and maps that we had required us to do geological drilling, which we did, and we had actually 2 geological surveys done on our property before we could build our house. And they did an excellent map of all the geology and everything and asked us to move it back 10 feet, which we did, and everything has been fine. I think that, using the existing maps, was perfectly fine. In fact, it's probably better, because if we had used that, we probably wouldn't have been able to build.
Well, that's not me. That's a question for, I think, you guys, right? It's related to your regulations. I would comment, though, that the old maps, like I showed you, did not do a very good job of identifying where those hazards are. And so I would argue that, this example that I showed you before, this guy. Shoot, lost it. That one right there is a great example, right, of where those some of these old maps do kind of a very poor job of unfortunately identifying an area that they say has a hazard but actually doesn't, and then completely, missing the really big obvious ones. So.
If you ask somebody who's been here for a while, they would know where that was.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Have to have it on map.
We are all newcomers too.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation, very informative.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Quick question.
Sure.
So you mentioned
Would you
earthquake.
identify yourself, please?
Jan Barbas, Curry County. You mentioned that landslides could occur because of various triggers, and one of them that you mentioned was our risk of severe earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
I think for possibly as we move through how to use these maps in the future, there might be some difference in how we want to treat earthquake risk or landslide movement as a result of earthquake risk due to and those risks that are more routine, such as saturated soil, which we get every year, and does the LiDAR mapping assist at all in differentiating the different types of risks, or is that something that the geological survey has to do on each property, or how might the county, if the county did choose to try to protect differently against different risks with different frequencies of occurring, how does the LiDAR assist?
Yeah, it doesn't, we don't know the majority of these what triggered them, whether it was rainfall or past earthquakes or man moving dirt around or man moving water around. We just don't know. And I do agree, thinking about the earthquake potential is a little overwhelming, and it's tough to think about what that's going to do to the landscape and how we can reduce risk. I think the key, though, is that you think of it like that. You think of it like risk reduction, not in the sense that, well, we can solve all the issues by not building somewhere. That is may not work that well, but I think if everyone thinks about it like, hey, let's just try and reduce the risk, the overall risk that we all face, that is the key way to do that. Either you can reduce that risk, which we can all do in various ways. Even this gentleman who said his house was recently built, you still have some risk, and I have some pamphlets that can help you figure out how to reduce your risk. And if we're all reducing that risk, that's much better than us kind of putting our heads in the sand and actually in some cases increasing our risk unknowingly. And that's what these maps, that's really our intent, is to help provide this information so that everyone can work on that risk reduction and not do things like, unknowingly concentrate all the water that's on your roof and dump it into one spot and cause a landslide that undermines your own house. We don't want to do that. And none of us want to do that. So that's, I think that's the goal, really, is that overall risk reduction. And if we all work at it in different ways, we can do that. It's an easier goal to obtain than try to say, hey, we are going to eliminate landslide risk in the next earthquake. That's an unattainable goal.
Did anybody else in the audience have any further questions? Can we pass the microphone up to the front, please?
Right that way to Connie.
Hi, Connie Hunter in South Curry County. My question is, you mentioned the Checobar fire and doing some LiDAR, having done some LiDAR mapping. Was there any mapping done of the Biscuit fire burn scar?
Not that I know of, no.
So we don't know, and we don't have the tools right now to look at those burn scars and predict what kinds of landslides might come in as a result of the fire?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay.
But that is exactly what we're going to try and do with the Chetco. But like I said, unfortunately, we have only a very small portion of that covered with LiDAR that we can do it for. But we are going to do it for that portion, which we'll provide to the county and the BLM and the Forest Service and all those.
So why only a small part? Are you going to continue to map more?
So everything is really based on funding, right? And we don't have any funding. So even for this Chetco bar fire, I had to write a grant to the Bureau of Land Management and talk to them about changing their priorities and where we would map. Yep, so it's all funding based, right? That's the limitation. And there's several pieces of funding that's involved with this. One is collecting the raw LiDAR data. This high resolution topographic data is very expensive. So getting it first, and then two, getting money for a professional to go through and do this new mapping is also very expensive.
Any other
We would absolutely love to do it and be able to provide it to everyone, but you know, limitations.
Can we pass the microphone back towards the back?
No, not off the top of my head, but we could do that.
My understanding through some sources that the liquefaction data is not complete yet. Is that correct?
Hold on, yeah. You won't be heard in the video, please. You want to restate the question?
I have heard from a couple of sources and was unable to, on the online mapping, find the liquefaction delineation. And so it's my understanding that that data is incomplete. Is that correct?
I don't believe it's been published. And unlike this information that I just showed you, which was published in 2014? Yeah. Until it's published, yeah, we consider it still draft.
Also, in terms of liquefaction, I understand, I appreciate all of this, but I hope that before the county acts on its proposal from last, whenever that was, August, that the liquefaction mapping is explained to the community so we understand on what basis you might be acting in that regard. Thank you.
Well, would something like this be appreciated once we finish that liquefaction mapping, coming back and giving a presentation on how that was made and what it means?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what I would recommend that we do. Any other questions?
Any other questions from the audience? No. Commissioner Boyce?
So I have a comment, and then I'm prepared to make a motion. Commissioner Huxley, under your leadership, certainly your direction, the 3 years you've been here, you took over the Community Development Department, certainly the Economic Development Department, and if we pass this order denying this and repealing this comprehensive plan, we will just have spent a fortune, and what did we gain? In addition to that, you heard me say a couple of times since January, what have we got that we've accomplished in this 10 months, other than rules of decorum, which you violate? So my motion, and we can certainly have this discussion openly if you would like, I'll be interested what you have to say, and I won't try and shut down your opinion. So my motion is to accept staff recommendation on this order and repeal the replacing a comprehensive plan.
Well,
in denying.
I think, I'm not following your comments. I think in the introduction, the Community Development Director said after the presentation, she wanted to come back to make some other additional comments or follow-up, or did I?
We're going to bump up against the 2-hour limit here?
Commissioner Boyce, I have the floor now. Am I correct? Bill, now are you pretty much
yeah, that was
with your presentation?
I'm done, unless you have questions for me about the science or the maps.
I think that's where we were at. We had all of the questions from the audience. Did you have any other questions then, Commissioner Goldman?
I was just very impressed with a lot of the comments from the audience and some really good information, and I appreciate that.
The suggestion on the liquefaction to come back with additional
it would be someone else.
Expertise.
Yep, it would be someone else from our department, the person that's leading up that effort.
While you're still up there, Community Director Johnson, you want to come up or just make, you have the mic and make a comment also.
Given the hour, I'll defer to the board if you want to continue your discussion until after lunchtime for me to make any comments. I didn't really have much more to say, but just a little bit of a wrap-up.
Ma'am,
Yes,
Mr.
Minister
Chairman,
Hitt.
thank you. Would you clarify, and I think would be helpful, what the actual staff recommendation is at this time?
The staff recommendation is to adopt an order denying the ordinance that was presented to you on August 2nd. The second staff recommendation was to accept the presentation by Mr. Burns, which you did. And the third recommendation was to direct us to come back at a later date for another public hearing on this map and potentially the liquefaction map. Now that would entail, I didn't include that in the written word, but that would entail having some public outreach meetings before I brought it back to you.
That you made reference to.
Yes.
Okay, County Council?
Thanks, if I could. So Director Johnson provided 3 points, but really I think there's just one action item on the motion, which was the first point, which would be to deny the changes that were proposed in August. The other two are more or less direction to staff. I don't think should be part of a motion on the
And that
on the
wasn't
action
part,
item.
if I may, I'm sorry.
Sure, but I just want to, I'm trying to get
Just
clarification
get
from the
clarification.
director.
But,
Is
yeah,
that,
but those were my recommendations, as
Sure.
Commissioner
The
Huxley
second,
asked
third
me.
was not part of my motion, and frankly, I don't want to spend any more money on this. Not now, not presently.
Okay, so
So we have a
we had
motion on the
one, we had County Council.
thanks, and just for the record, this was a continuation of a public hearing. We did take
Correct.
public comment. I think there's no one else who wants to speak on this, and then has the chair closed the public hearing?
We have not at this,
Okay.
at this
Is there
point.
any?
I just wanted to
Okay.
have absolute clarification
Okay.
where we were headed.
Sure,
You-
because it would, I think you want to make sure that there's no more speaking and close the public hearing
Correct.
before you do a motion.
Okay, so and I think we have allowed and encouraged anyone who had questions here to comment. So at this point, given I don't see any further wish for anybody to comment, we will close the public comment period. And would entertain a motion
There is a motion on the floor.
but has the motion been made by a commissioner?
Well, Commissioner
Yeah,
Boyce made a motion.
Okay, and your motion was what, Commissioner Boyce?
To accept staff recommendation on the first item for the repeal the comprehensive plan and deny, as we set aside, or they suggested back on, what was it, August 2nd, I think you said.
Okay, so that's the motion.
That's the motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And is my question, we'll open up for comments. That was the community director's recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? Okay. So we have any further conversation on that motion? Then call for that question.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, while you're still up there then, just for direction so we're clear, what to restate the two points.
Well, I think the one point's already been handled because you heard Mr. Burns' presentation. The second point, I'm sorry. The second recommendation was to authorize us to bring this back at a future date to consider adoption of the most current map with the intervening public workshops in advance of coming to you.
Administrator Hitt?
Just a question of clarification, Mr. Chair, and I guess this would also be for County Council. Your, the draft order that was part of your package, agenda packet, includes a Part B, now therefore the Curry County Board of Commissioners hereby orders proposal, although what Mrs. Johnson said, proposal to adopt comprehensive plan liquefaction and landslide maps related to zoning ordinance, et cetera. So proposal to adopt, I would agree, interpretation is come back to you later for a formal possibility of adoption. And I think Mrs. Johnson is correct that that would be best done after doing some public outreach and of course probably passing it through the Planning Commission, I would assume, would be a part of your plan. So I would then, and so my question and clarification is, I'm not sure Commissioner Boyce's motion was to adopt the proposed order, or you're at this point kind of basically bifurcating?
Appreciate that clarification.
Yeah.
So it would just represent item A.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have a County Counsel?
Sure, sorry, I still haven't got my computer here. So the proposed order is to deny both the natural hazard zoning and the maps. And Commissioner Boyce, you wanted not deny the second one, or you said you were only speaking to A. What
Sounded like we had a consensus here that was going to require additional research. Planning Commission, was that your recommendation, Administrator Head?
Right, but by denying it now, that's why I started to speak that we're having one motion on the order,
Correct.
and then the rest is direction to staff.
That's been my understanding.
So do we need a second motion on B?
Well, it's interesting because I think we might need a friendly amendment to your motion, Commissioner, if you didn't intend B, because the second part, even after we deny changing today, basically the question is, do we adopt the proposal that was presented in August or not? And Community Development Director Johnson in the order says no, and that's one action. And then Community Development Director Johnson, County Administrator, myself are looking then for board direction to what do we do next. And Community Development Director Johnson is saying, we will work this up and bring back to you another basically separate proposal legally at a future date. Right. And so by denying both A and B today, you are not precluding taking those next steps in the future. So I think
I just made it specific to item A and amended it and followed your recommendation there. So do we have a clear understanding on that then?
It's to adopt the order denying A and B. Is that?
No.
No.
Well,
okay. It's to adopt an order denying the zoning code
and tabling
amendments
B.
and the comprehensive plan amendments, period. That was your motion,
that was
correct?
his motion.
And I amended
Yes.
it, correct? Specific to item A, and we tabled item B. Is that,
Carolyn, are you looking at the order?
I'm looking at the order, and the order specifies
we can do that.
denial of the zoning amendments and the comprehensive plan amendments that were presented last on August 2nd. It doesn't reference the last recommendation in the staff report, which is to authorize us to bring this to you at a future date after the community has had more time to look at this map and the liquefaction map in separate community workshops.
And that was my understanding in the beginning, and I think that's a good approach.
Okay. Well, then I guess I would ask for, I would like to see if there's consensus among the board that you would like me to put forth that effort and come back to you at a later date. It won't be next month, it won't be 2 months. I don't know when that'll be, but once the liquefaction maps have gone through their time at Dogami and can be released, I would anticipate I would do them both at the same time. And I don't know when that's going to be, so.
Well, I would agree to that because unless I totally misread, and I don't think so, I've read from this audience that they would like to see,
sure,
that further information. I think it's invaluable for the citizens. And we've put behind us the August 2nd, but, I'm sorry? So,
how much money are we?
Once it goes to bed, to leave it there and not wake it up again.
Yes. We don't have the money.
Kills it once, let it die.
So perhaps my
Your other option,
understanding is not, but it's what's your recommendation?
Your other option,
okay.
Your other option as an alternative to this recommendation is not to authorize us to come back to you at a future date on this matter. However, when these maps are completed by Dogami, the liquefaction maps, and they are public, if someone comes in and wants to develop in areas under our old map that we identify as being potentially hazardous, we will verbally share with them. There are other resources you can look at on the Dogami website, and that's what we would do. So if you choose not to go with recommendation 3, I'm fine with that. I don't think you would need to do much more than tell me that you're not interested.
So if I could, so again, I think the folks in the audience understand that there are, again, 2 things happening. The usual protocol for legislation is kind of you do one thing at a time. And so when you ask what the recommendations are from Community Development Director Johnson, she gave 3 things. The first one is to adopt this order, which denies both. And I just want to make sure Commissioner Boyce says he's only wanted to deny the one, but I think that the testimony was denying both makes sense. And then that's a vote and we're done. The rest is direction to staff that's not in this order. So that would be a second item to consider, whether you're going to direct staff to go back and work on this and bring something back at a later time. That is a separate thing to talk about. And I know Commissioner Boyce said, I want to stop it now and not bring it back and not spend any more money on it. He almost actually added an additional item to the order but really we're just talking about, and this is in a land use legislative context, are we going to adopt legislation today or not? Direction to staff in the future would be a separate item from the proposed order in the packet. So I understand there's a desire from the Community Development Director staff to get direction from the board. It's technically not part of the order. It's not part of the motion on the legislation that's before you. And I would prefer if you just vote on this order in its entirety, approve or deny the proposed legislation and map changes. And I think the staff recommendation there is to deny in the entirety. And then I think the board can then take up the question, do we want to today give Community Development Director Johnson and staff direction to go back and rework these and bring us something back at a later time? But I would not prefer that be included in the first item of business. I hope, and I know I spoke very long-windedly there, but I'd like you to just vote on the order. And you kind of heard from the gallery that, you know, if you kill it, don't bring it back. But the first question is, are you going to kill it? And then you can decide at a separate time whether they're 2 separate questions.
And that doesn't have to be today.
Well,
forgive me for interrupting.
Correct. No, Commissioner, you're tracking. But I think, right, in other words, you could tell Community Development Director Johnson, listen, we'll let you know if we want you to do that. For now, we're not asking you to. Something along those lines. So
I'll change or amend my, if I may, motion again, and I'm going to just read it. Per staff recommended in this order, matter of an order that denies a proposed ordinance repealing and replacing Comprehensive Plan Chapter 7, Natural Hazards, and the addition of zoning ordinance section 3.254, liquefaction. Is that spelled correctly? Never mind. Hazards overlay zone and section 3.255, landslide hazards overlay zone. Thank you. That's my motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have any further question on or conversation on this proposal, which on this order is A only?
No, no, sir. He read the entire title. He revised it. Yep.
Oh, well, I'm looking at A and B further down then.
I'm not sure. He read the title of it.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, I'm looking at specific.
Yep.
Which is different.
Yep.
A little differently worded.
Okay.
Further down on the order.
The motion is to adopt the order in its entirety.
Okay. Any further discussion?
It's the order denies the changes, so it's to deny the changes.
Let me read it again.
No, it's okay.
Back to the old double negative thing.
Okay.
Call for the question.
Okay.
I think there was a second by Commissioner Gold.
Commissioner Gold. Any further discussion? Call for the question.
Aye.
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 Victory. Wow.
Let me just say one thing, if I could, Chair Huxley.
Mr. Gold?
I think all the information that we have is valuable, and I think anybody applying for a permit should have all the information, as you suggested. I know if I were going to build, I would want to know all of the information. And as this other gentleman back here so aptly put, you can only get the exact information if you have that geological drilling down. So I think it's important that people have the information when they come to apply for their permits.
Commissioner Boyce?
Mr. Gold, since you opened up the discussion, do I interpret that then that you're in favor of the thousands of dollars we just spent on this?
That's not what I was saying at all.
Okay, well,
I
that's
was
what we
saying,
did. And so it is invaluable information, but also, as you communicated the other day, and also you just communicated, I'm fully confident in your staff. When people come in and need to know this information that you're going to, and have consistently, taking them and showing what the potential risk is. And with that confidence, I think we can let this go now, because I believe, emphasizing again, your staff will follow that responsibility, say, here's what's available. We are concerned, we're not concerned. We're going to upgrade as much as we can. That additional responsibility as a county, I think you're in control of that. Appreciated, enough said.
Thank you.
My preference at this time would not be to give direction, but not to close that off and say that it's absolutely out of the question.
Okay.
I think
Could you clarify? I'm not sure what you're referencing there, Mr.
Well, the recommendation, I think, from the community director was or asking for direction to pursue interfacing with residents and going further into additional mapping, the liquefaction maps, possibly getting a representative from Dugami back. When those maps are done, no timeline. It could be, it's not going to be in a month or 2 or 3 was the indication I had, because the mapping's not done completely. But to bring that back, not to say that it's out of the question, and not to do that.
I think that if the board decides not to direct, to authorize us to go out to the community and introduce the liquefaction maps, what I would simply do is come back to you at a future date and let the board know, and let everyone who's on that email list, there's probably 150 folks, that Dogami, when the time comes, has approved their liquefaction maps. It's gone out of internal review, and it would be an FYI only. And that way, if people come in and they want to develop, we would say, this is the map we have, but the Dogami maps, you might want to look at them as well. And then they can make their own decision. So I think I could do it just like that. Just let you know when the liquefaction maps are done, and let everybody else know as well, and then everybody will have the information.
And we can act accordingly at that point.
If you decide at that
also.
time that you would
Correct.
like to have
Correct.
the county officially adopt the maps, you could direct that.
and I
Commissioner
would
Gold?
like to have another representative from Dagami to show us those maps when they are available. Because quite frankly, I'm one, the more information we have, the more facts we have, the better off we are as far as making those decisions.
Well, I think we could do that. Probably a workshop format would be best.
I was just going to suggest that.
This is an FYI for the community to come and learn about what Dogami's done relative to the liquefaction maps only, and not go into a discussion about officially adopting the maps.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so was the board in agreement or consensus with that direction? Commissioner
I am.
Gold? Commissioner Boyce?
I don't want to abstain here, but every day is a new adventure, so I'll be on the ball to determine to what degree the public needs important notification. And I think, to Commissioner Gold's point, we have some good files now that'll be beneficial down the road. So priorities are very important to me.
I'm thinking that...
I'll give consent, you know, I'm not sure whether that was or wasn't, but I'm in agreement with...
Mr. Huxley, I will offer you the support and the consensus there additionally.
Okay, so we have unanimous consent.
That's correct.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Burns, for coming.
Yes, thank you
We
very
came
much.
a long way. Thank you
Very
very
much.
much.
He
It
probably wants a
is-
standing ovation, right?
It is 12:24. We're going to take a lunch break, and we'll return at 1:30.
Oh.
You got the sign.
Okay, it's 1:30. Back from lunch break, Wednesday, November 1st, 2017. Continuing on the Curry County Commissioner General Meeting. We are now at agenda item 6A, which is revision of the Curry County Agenda Routing Slip Policy and Form and the proposed orders. Interim Director or Administrator John Hitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. If I may, I would like to read a couple of things just as background for this agenda item, as well as for the next one relating to meetings, Commissioner meetings. So I'm reading from Ordinance 17-01, which created the position of County Administrator. And I'm reading selective, obviously, sections, and I'll make my point of why I'm doing this once I finish. It says this ordinance is to be interpreted as a broad delegation to the county administrator, a board of commissioner authority. So you made a broad delegation of authority. Then it says board members may not direct any county employee in the performance of their duties. And that is outlined in this ordinance is the responsibility of the county administrator, with certain exceptions. The next section that I want to quote from, it says the county administrator shall be responsible to the Board of Commissioners for the administration and management of the county. Also have the responsibility for preparing administrative regulations and policies to carry out the efficient operation of the county, preparing and managing the board agenda, and to keep the board informed of pertinent matters related to the administration and management of the county. So in broad brush, both this first one and the second one relating to meetings, but this first one relating to the policy and, I'm sorry, sir.
If I may interrupt, John Jesuit, could you go ahead and click off and turn that screen off, please? That was from the presentation.
that.
Thank you.
Oh, good.
Sorry.
No, that's quite all right, thank you. Is that both of these proposed policy revisions are for the purpose of including the role in a formal sense of the county administrator, a role I might add already basically given to the county administrator via your ordinance 17-01, but not obviously in a variety of board policies, ordinances, personnel rules and so on, not currently, obviously weren't changed at the same time. So these two changes are first and foremost to include and formalize in these particular areas the role of the county administrator. In addition, they are for the purpose of giving, defining roles, particularly of the county administrator, more accurately or more completely, at least in my view, but at the same time granting to the county administrator that management role, that administrative role that you previously have delegated to him or to her. In other words, I'm the manager of, for example, the department heads. Now, not the elected officials, but the department heads. So as a department head, let's say the roadmaster, as I manage the roadmaster, obviously the details of how he runs his department, unless something is misfiring or something, expenditures are out of whack or performance jobs, performance standards are not being met. But outside of that, I generally, and I think most managers, always exceptions, but most managers would let Mr. Robbins manage his department in the details of that. Work assignments, what vehicles he has, how he uses those vehicles, et cetera, up to him in the day-to-day performance of his department. So prior, or actually what you have now in the books, is in both these, particularly the agenda routing slip policy, is a very detailed, very exacting, very precise, step-by-step, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then you result with an agenda item. What I'm suggesting to you is just, again, a broad viewpoint, is to let the administrator worry about the details of that. That's really the administrator's role. The administrator's ultimate purpose and goal is to make sure you, as the decision makers, as I mentioned earlier this morning, have on your agenda important and significant matters for you to decide at the policy making, ordinance making level in particular, budget making, of course, but also that you are presented with that information in sufficient quantity and with sufficient accuracy to allow you to be informed decision makers. It really isn't, and I don't say this in a negative or snotty way at all, it really isn't, and in my view shouldn't be, your purview as to how I provide that information to you. Now, if you in fact find, hey, John, this is a bunch of crap you're giving us, or it wasn't sufficient, or I don't understand where you're going with this, then yes, then that's back on me as the county administrator, and to make sure, again, that I give you the information with sufficient clarity, accuracy, and timeliness that you can make informed decisions. Again, exactly how I get there, whether I task the roadmaster to give me certain pieces of information, or John Jesuit, or the specific timing, whether I ask for that information on a Monday morning, or a Thursday afternoon, or a Friday at noon, really is irrelevant to you, I believe, other than, again, obviously you have to have it in a timely enough manner, and we've kind of and this form defines that. Timely enough is by 4 p.m. Friday afternoon prior to a meeting. Now, if you need more time than that, then that's a whole other question. Then obviously we would need to push these times back for me to deliver a complete and fully comprehensive and adequate agenda packet. But again, I think the details of how I get there in providing you that comprehensive and adequate agenda packet really should be left up to the county administrator. Now, what I have before you is a specific policy which is much more general than the old policy. It does, excuse me.
More general, you said?
Is much more general than the old policy, and which I think it should be. And it is more, in my view, more of a guideline for the rest of the staff, and a reminder, of course, for myself as well as Mr. Jesuit, as to, okay, how, and particularly if somebody's gone, well, hey, whoa, what's this agenda process? How do we do it? Well, here's the guideline of how we do it, rather than a specific, thou shalt or thou shalt not do certain things in certain ways at certain exact timing. Now, to me, another option would be, and this is the case, now I know this isn't the case in Mr. Huddle's experience at the city of Medford, but is the case in my experience at the very cities I've served at. These kind of guidelines aren't formalized. They're just, that's how the city manager conducts his business. And again, if he is doing that in a way that the mayor or any of the city councilors find inadequate, then it's up to the city manager to internally within his staff and with his own operations to make those changes. So again, I apologize, first off, there were some typos here, and I apologize for that, and obviously I would not expect you to sign a document with typos, so we can certainly correct those. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that what you have before you here, after my memo, the proposed revised policy is perfect by any means, not that it can't be improved, but what I would urge you, obviously it's ultimately your call, but I would urge you to leave whatever changes you might like to see, to leave them as general as you reasonably can, and leave as much administrative authority that you've already delegated here in your prior ordinance, leave that administrative authority and detail authority with the county administrator. So that's kind of my overview of the revisions to the agenda routing system form and policy. Oh, one last comment on the actual revised policy, or form, excuse me, is, again, I tried to simplify the form. I tried to make it a little easier, a little quicker for people to fill out. It is, and in the guidelines here, I'm going to call them, that are proposed, is as far as coordinating with council, county council, as far as coordinating with the finance department, that I am proposing, and I will enforce that, needs to be done prior to this AGRS being submitted to the BOC office, and also would be then encompassed, like I did with my memo, encompassed in a statement in the memo that this has been reviewed by county council, been reviewed by finance manager. If it's a personnel issue, obviously it would be reviewed by the personnel manager, and in all those cases would also be reviewed by me. If somebody in the road department wants to change some of our regulations, or has or a contract, a road contract, obviously I would expect them, before they submit this AGRS and the paperwork to me, they've already coordinated with Mr. Huddle, and then after they've coordinated with him, they submit to me, to the BOC office, the AGRS, the cover memo, and supporting documentation. Something that doesn't look quite right, or I have a question about some of the legal side of it, then I still have an opportunity, and would follow up, and an opportunity to coordinate then directly with Mr. Huddle, for example, myself. So that's kind of the ideas encompassed in this.
Commissioner Gold?
I'm looking at the whole thing, and what we want you to do is produce a product.
Mm-hmm.
How you get there, it's kind of like solving a problem. You could get there in 50 different ways as long as you get there. So I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyce?
No, it's good.
Okay. I had some questions earlier this morning, and I had given a copy of my marked up.
Would you want that back?
Oh, no, that's yours.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And if you go to the page 1, where on the top it says, Article 1 Agenda Routing Slip, AGRS, and then it's got Table of Contents 14.100 for all three. Okay. Mike, I guess just a suggestion on this document or somewhere, because of issues we've had over past years with, again, the same document or 3 different documents with exactly the same heading, no revision or anything. At least three revisions, but just to somewhere up at that, and I think I had just put date, highlighted something there with a date or revision, so that or so that everyone knows which document we're working with, because as you have the authority and should to change it, if you don't, you have to put revisions, or we won't know which one came before the other. In part 2, in submitting the AGRS, you went through and you had addressed it here that the different departments would have to be contacted, the clerk, legal, finance, and then you went into future where it would be located on the S drive, and question, I guess the biggest question that jumped out at me here was the time. In other words, it's no problem doing that. On the form now, it has review, I think, for legal and review for finance. I think it has review for the clerk also. And there's never been a concern as far as whether it was done or not. And in some cases, it may not have been done. But the point is, we would submit, and I speak for myself, submitting the routing slip, and with no concern, okay, whether it's reviewed or not, because it's out of our purview to do that, you know. And in this case, it's put right back in as a responsibility, which is fine. But a responsibility to have that done before you even submit it.
Correct.
And so I'm saying it could hold up the process, because assuming that many of the items might have need to be reviewed for legal, for finance, by the clerk, literally that could take a week or two. And not that it should, but all of a sudden it put in some obstacles or time frame obstacles that all of a sudden we would be responsible for getting this information way before, let's say that the Wednesday or Thursday, now I think it changed to Thursday at noon. The week before, to even think then we have to follow through, we have to communicate with legal counsel, have it all ready, because we can't do a concept, we have to have it prepared at that time. Send it to legal counsel, send it to the clerk, send it to finance, and then we're spending more time just following up to make sure that they get back. What if they're sick? What if they're on vacation? On and on and on. I just see this, not that it doesn't need to be done, not that it's not done now, but I see this as something that would just halt the progress of this going forward in order to meet the ultimate deadline of Thursday by noon.
May I respond?
And maybe that legal would have to review after finance, or finance would have to, not that necessarily they could all review at the same time, because honestly, I don't know what all their review is at this point. It's never been a concern.
Well, yeah, well, you raise good points, Mr. Chairman. And my response would be that I think that the review that was done on the AGRS up to this point in time, with many, many exceptions, but was often kind of a perfunctory. Yeah, just click.
But not now.
But not now, yes.
And it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it should be.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree completely.
And part of my goal here is to back up that whole process in everybody's mind, to start thinking. Don't start thinking about submitting an agenda item at noon on Wednesday.
Or Thursday.
Or even, yes, that's certainly not noon on Thursday. Because A, you have to write a memo. B, I have to see that memo and review that memo. So I've got to see that memo. I've got to review it. I've got to be okay. Yes, this memo's okay.
That's fine. I'm
yeah,
fine
all
with
that's got to be
It's
good.
what
Or
you
I'm going to
can't
kick it back anyway. And in that memo, so here's what my thinking was. Before they even start writing the memo, or as they start to write the memo, they need to go through that thought process. Well, should this have a legal review? Oh, yes, I guess it should. So you'd better send what you've got proposed to Mr. Huddle now, i.e. Monday or the week before, whenever it is. So in part, in part, that's part of my goal. Yes, is to push these things back earlier, even though I'm, in one sense, giving them an extra time to noon on Thursday versus 5 o'clock on Wednesday. But really, because these things need to be submitted to me for my approval prior to noon on Thursday, they're going to have to back, the staff members are going to have to back, and myself included, are going to have to back that up.
So if that's not done in a timely manner, if you had to go to, say, legal or finance, that could be put on the following meetings.
Yes, as it says in here,
rather than
unless you can make a...
probably would be 2 weeks.
Yes.
2 weeks
In many
back,
cases,
because
it would be 2 weeks.
Realistically, to think
unless
that,
unless they can make a compelling case to me why it didn't happen.
I'm just saying that I think that's what would be the reality.
I agree.
And then as far as the people learning, okay, what does the tip, because it would have, for all purposes, it would have to be pretty much complete before you would send it.
Absolutely.
To
That's
the
the idea.
or the clerk or the finance, or they'd look and say, well, what do you want us to do?
Exactly.
So we'd be looking at Thursday by noon, not for the next week, but maybe for 3 weeks out.
It could, in many cases, it would be. Yes.
I think that would be more the norm than the exception.
Yes,
okay.
I would agree.
Okay. Oh, Commissioner Boyce?
I think that's terribly unrealistic. I don't think it's in the best interest in serving the people when you start backing up that far. I can appreciate your workload, but to have it that restrictive, and if I'm understanding correctly here, potentially 2 weeks, that is it's just not realistic to me in the normal sequence of what happens in a given business day. So I appreciate the Thursday window, and I think there is more responsibility. I'm just looking from my standpoint to make sure that I make your job easier, but going back too far, I don't think that's in the best interest of the public. That's all.
Why don't we let John answer, then Commissioner Gold?
He'll probably say the same thing I'm going to say, so go for it.
Well, I appreciate your concerns there, Commissioner Boyce, and they're valid, no question. I did review all of this with our department managers and gave them ample opportunity if they had any concerns about my proposed revision and how we put together agendas and the timing to respond to me, either personally or as a group, and I did not get any negative response or concerns. Now, I would say, I would think in many cases, backing up 2 weeks would be the kind of the extreme case. I think in many cases...
More the exception.
Yeah, okay. More the exception. Many cases, this can be done much more quickly. For example, one of the things I want to make sure in this process, we're not asking finance and that's why I say in this revised policy, they need to get together with me. So work with the county administrators to planning for and preparing the AGRS. So that's partly why we have the matrix online. They're going to put on the online, I want to do something, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, 6 months from now. And so as soon as I see that go online, I'm going to say, okay, I think, make sure you get your memo to me at least a day or two in advance so I can review it, make sure if it needs legal, coordinate with Mr. Huddle and so on. And so I think in most of these cases, except for the really complicated ones, that can be done, within a few days prior to the Thursday noon.
I think...
I was just going to say, I don't think every item that goes on the agenda is going to have to be scrutinized.
It doesn't, yeah.
But there are some times that it's going to have to be, and I think we need to be patient with that.
Commissioner Boyce?
Well, I just think that realistically it might be just kind of a psychological goal to be prepared to do Tuesday instead of Wednesday. It would give you a little extra time, which I understand you need. That's all.
What do you expect? Because again, this is going to be a learning curve and an expectation curve as far as finance, legal, clerk, because I don't know what all they do or don't do, or have not done, perhaps, or have done in the past. What will be, or what is the expectation for the future? In other words, I don't see that. To me, I would see that I'd have to really have the memo also pretty well done would give them in finance or legal. That's what you're giving them an idea of what it is you're proposing.
Right.
And then county council.
If I could, and this might just give some background, I can just describe how, because currently, at least legal and clerk review it, and I think we've incorporated finance into it. But the timing of that is we have a deadline for submittal to BOC, which is a Wednesday, and then the goal is to publish the agenda by Friday, and the materials go into a computer file that I go in and review. I believe the clerk goes in and review, and then finance can go in and review that file, and it all happens in sometimes a day or a couple of days. But usually what happens is the BOC office gets all the materials that have been submitted and says, okay, the materials are ready for review. And then I go in and review, and if I have questions, I get on the phone with the department head who submitted it. So what is currently happening is all those reviews are happening within 24 to 48 hours and sometimes less. So to think that there's going to be a large delay by a legal, finance, or any other clerk review, I don't think that's borne out by what's currently happening right now. I think all those reviews are happening within a matter of a couple of days. So now, there may be some pre-work that you want to do before submitting it to John Hitt. So in other words,
he's saying,
yes,
I am saying that. That's what all this is. This is required before submittal.
Okay.
So all of a sudden,
but either way, that I meant differently. But either way, the required preview could still happen within that same time period.
It could. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, even before that, in other words, what happens sometimes is people will come to me and say, hey, this is something I want to do. There's no urgency. Let's have a meeting. You know, it's not uncommon to have way more legal review, a couple of iterations of something, go back and forth between me and a department, or John Hitt and a department, or finance, you know, and then it gets submitted to the agenda for final, quote unquote, review. So there's legal review and then there's legal review.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to be too glib by that, but essentially the ultimate legal review can happen in very short order, as well as finance and clerk. But you may want to, as a department or a commissioner or anyone, do a little bit of homework before that. So I'm trying not to be difficult or too obtuse. I'm just trying to give some hints or some experience on what has been happening and the time frames involved in some of that. So,
Commissioner Gold?
If you were thinking of putting forth a really big item on the agenda, it may take months before you get to the point where it's ready to go on the agenda and be talked about.
Yeah, and that's not the one.
And that's not always
we're
the
talking
case,
about
but
here, but this is going to the BOC email address.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So it can't go there. Well, where's it going to go on the first drafts when we want to get receive review prior to submitting? Are we going to submit it to the same email address?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Or to me directly.
Wait a minute, I'm not sure if I understood the question or the
well, if I
answer.
understood it correctly, so try again.
I think what we're saying is that right now we send it by
one place.
Wednesday or a deadline.
And you send it to one
Whatever
place.
happens.
Right, right.
And we send it to this BOC office address.
And then you get the 3 reviews after just sending it to one
whatever,
place.
but typically that's been the end of it until we see it come up over the week, on the weekend, as far as it's on the agenda.
Right.
But now we're saying, okay, we're going to send something before that even occurs, that final send it, but we're going to send it to the same email address are we going to note then just for legal, clerk, whatever review, and then we're going to get something back, and then we're going to send it back again?
No,
to the
I would
same
handle it
office?
from that point normally. So, for example, if you sent me an AGRS with a draft memo, let's say, and then I would review it, and you can just send it to my email or BOC, either way it gets to my email, and I would review it, and let's say that's a Tuesday afternoon or a Wednesday morning, and then I would come back and say, Commissioner Boyce, for example, I like what you've got, but I do think John Huddle needs to review it. So along with sending my response to you, I'm CCing Mr. Huddle, and I'm also going to have a budget impact. So I'm going to CC our county or our county accountant, and and then I would require, to the extent that I can, require that those individuals that need to do those reviews respond to me as well as to yourself in time to beat that Thursday cutoff.
Well, we'll just have to see how it works out.
But let me give you, if I may, Mr. Chair, an example. And she's not the only one that does this, but she's the one I've had the most interfacing with, Carolyn Johnson, in Community Development Department. As soon as she knows that she needs to put an item on the agenda, she sends me an email, say, John, can we talk? And that's great. I love that. So she comes up, John, I got this, I got, public hearing, whatever it is. And then, and then we just by discussion say, well, Carolyn, make sure, you get that to John Huddle for review, or boy, that is going to have a budgetary impact. You need to talk with our county accountant, or let's go over the budget ourselves. And so all that discussion is usually done very informally, just in my office, by letting me know that she wants to place something on the agenda, or with the S-Drive matrix, which will be effective, I will say, hey, this is popping up, and I don't know anything about this. Okay. Hey, Doug Robbins or Carolyn Johnson, what's going on? What do you want to do? And then we either meet in person, which is usually my first choice, or if that can't happen, we do this kind of.
We'll see how it, how it would work. One other thing on the first page, also down. That an adequate cover memo shall include, and it goes into what it'll include. I would suggest, and this is what I said would be good, just a template, a dated template.
Oh, okay.
So that you don't get, if you get 20 different people that you say, give me a cover memo, you probably get 20 different.
Yeah, that's true.
Formats.
Yeah. Okay, we can do that.
And
good idea.
Last. On part 3 on the AGRS timing, it's into the AGRS, and all supporting documentation and cover memos shall be submitted to the BOC office. That's the final submittal.
Right.
We're back to of course, the use of the word all and supporting documentation. So what's your expectation? Is a cover memo going to suffice in many cases?
In many cases, it would. In many cases, it would.
Okay, properly done.
Properly done,
yeah.
and
you
thorough.
go into detail there?
Yeah, yeah, and thorough memo. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then if we go to the form, and it didn't, obviously the drop-down memo, the form that was the Rev 10/12/2017, and about 1/4 of the way down, on the right, it says submission type in capital letters.